The night was quiet, the kind of silence that only lonely highways know. The moon hung low, half hidden behind drifting clouds, as the wind carried the faint hum of a single motorcycle engine. Keanu Reeves had been riding for hours. No destination, no hurry. Just the open road and the sound of his thoughts. The city lights had faded long ago, replaced by shadows and the occasional flicker of distant neon. His gas tank was nearly empty, and his wallet held just $8, the last of what he had brought for this trip. But he didn't care. For him, these quiet rides weren't about money. They were about peace, about staying human in a world that often forgot what that meant. Finally, a flickering sign appeared in the distance. Randy's Gas and Diner, open 24 hours. The place looked old, like it hadn't been touched since the 80s. A single light buzzed above the entrance, and a dusty flag swayed in the cold wind. Keanu pulled in, parked his bike, and stretched. As he walked toward the counter, something caught his eye. A man standing beside a broken-down Harley Davidson. Heavy leather jacket, tattoos, long beard, skull patches. Unmistakably a Hell's Angel. The man kicked the tire in frustration, muttering curses under his breath. His hands were greasy, his face tired, and beside him, a nearly empty gas can. Most people would have avoided him. You could feel the fear in the air. The gas station clerk, the old couple at the diner window, everyone pretending not to notice. But Keanu wasn't most people. He walked over slowly, calm and steady. "Need some help?" he asked gently. The biker looked up, his eyes suspicious. "Nah, man. I'm fine. Just out of gas. And luck." He laughed bitterly, kicking the tire again. Keanu paused for a moment, then reached into his pocket. $8. That was it. He could have ignored him, filled his own tank, and left, but instead he handed the money to the man. "Here, get yourself some gas and a coffee. You look like you need it more than I do." The biker frowned. "You serious? You don't even know me." Keanu smiled, that soft, unassuming smile he was known for. "Maybe not," he said, "but I know what it's like to need help and have no one stop." There was a silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. The biker took the money reluctantly, muttering a quiet, "Thanks, man." Keanu just nodded, walked back to his bike, and rode off into the darkness. No cameras. No audience. Just one human helping another. But what neither of them knew was that single act of kindness, that small $8 gesture, was about to travel miles and come back to Keanu in a way he'd never imagined. Because sometimes the road you take to help someone becomes the same road that brings the miracle back to you. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, spilling orange light across the empty desert highway. For most people, it was just another morning. But for the man Keanu had helped and the rugged, road-worn biker, it was something more. He had spent the night sitting by his repaired Harley, staring at the gas can and the memory of a stranger who had handed him his last $8 without hesitation. No one had ever done that for him, not in years. People usually saw his jacket first, the skull patch, the Hell's Angel logo, and turned away. To them, he was danger, trouble, a man to avoid. But that night, someone had seen past all of that. Someone who didn't flinch, didn't ask questions, didn't expect anything in return, just kindness, pure and simple. Hours earlier, after Keanu had ridden off, the biker finally used the $8, half for a gallon of gas, half for a coffee. He sat at the diner counter, hands still trembling. The waitress, curious, asked, "Who gave you the cash?" The biker smiled faintly. "Just some guy. Long hair, black jacket, rode a classic Norton." The old man beside him turned, eyes widening. "You mean Keanu Reeves?" The biker frowned. "What?" Couldn't be," but the old man nodded. "Son, I know that face anywhere." "That was him." The biker froze. He replayed the moment in his head. The calm eyes, the quiet tone, the kindness that didn't feel forced. Keanu Reeves. The thought didn't make sense. Why would someone like him stop to help a stranger in the middle of nowhere and give away his last $8? The answer wouldn't come that night. But it didn't matter. Something inside the biker had already changed. By noon, he finally rolled into his group's meeting spot, a small roadside cafe filled with the roar of Harley engines and laughter. His brothers were there, rough men, faces hardened by the road, They greeted him with jokes, but when he told them what had happened, the room fell silent. "You're saying Keanu Reeves gave you money?" One of them asked, half laughing, half stunned. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Didn't even care who I was, just helped me." For a moment, no one spoke. Then their leader, a tall man with a silver beard and leather vest, said something that made them all pause. "You know, we talk about respect all the time, but maybe we've been looking for it in the wrong places." He looked around the table, his voice steady. "Tomorrow morning, we ride out. I want to find that man, and this time we give something back." The group nodded. No hesitation, no jokes. Just a silent agreement that what they were about to do wasn't about fame or favors. It was about honor. Meanwhile, miles away, Keanu was sitting outside a small roadside motel. His bike leaned against the wall and a cup of cheap coffee steamed beside him. He wasn't thinking about last night. To him, helping a stranger was nothing special. It was just human. But destiny had already started turning its wheels. As the sun began to sink again, he noticed something strange. The distant echo of motorcycle engines. 1, then 3, then 10. The sound grew louder, heavier, rolling like thunder. He stood, squinting toward the road, his hand shading his eyes. A cloud of dust rose in the distance. Dozens of headlights flickered through the haze. He smiled softly, unaware that this was only the beginning. What he thought was just a simple act of kindness was about to return multiplied, in a way that would silence the streets and touch every soul who witnessed it. Because sometimes kindness doesn't just travel, it rides back to you on 100 roaring engines. Morning light crept slowly across the cracked walls of the old roadside motel. Keanu Reeves sat on the wooden steps outside his room, a half-finished cup of coffee beside him. The world was still. No noise, no movement, just the distant whisper of wind brushing through desert dust. He'd been traveling for days, enjoying the silence that fame never gave him. No interviews. No flashing lights. Just the road and the sound of his engine. But today, that silence was about to shatter. It started as a low rumble. At first, Keanu thought it was thunder, distant, harmless. But as seconds passed, the sound grew heavier, sharper, rolling closer like a storm made of metal and gasoline. He stood up, squinting toward the road. A thin cloud of dust was rising in the distance. The rumble turned into a roar. Engines. Not 1, not 10. Dozens. The motel clerk, a nervous old man, peeked out from behind the glass door. You expecting company, mister?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Not that I know of." Within minutes, the highway filled with roaring machines. Rows of Harley-Davidsons gleamed under the sun. Black, silver, chrome. A sea of leather jackets and thunder. The air vibrated with the sound of 100 exhausts. Guests stepped out of their rooms wide-eyed. Some moved back in fear. Others whispered, "Hell's Angels." The bikers slowed down as they reached the motel, forming a perfect semicircle around the parking lot. Engines idled, rumbling like growling beasts. Keanu didn't move. He simply stood there, calm, curious, his hair moving slightly in the wind. The leader dismounted first, tall, silver beard, black sunglasses. Behind him, the same biker Keanu had helped the night before removed his helmet, eyes locked on him. The clerk whispered nervously, "Should I call someone?" Keanu shook his head gently. No need, silence fell. The engines went quiet one by one until all that was left was the faint tick of cooling metal and the heartbeat of the moment. The leader walked toward him slowly, boots crunching on gravel. People watched from windows. A woman whispered, "They're going to start trouble." But the man stopped just a few feet away and said in a deep, steady voice, "You're the one who helped one of ours last night." Keanu nodded. Just did what anyone would do. The leader looked around, then back at him. Not everyone would have done that. Especially not for us. The tension in the air cracked, shifting from fear to something different, something heavy with emotion. The biker from last night stepped forward, holding something in his hand, the same gas receipt Keanu had paid for. It was wrinkled, folded, and now, framed in a small wooden box, he held it out. "This isn't about gas or money. You reminded me what respect looks like, and I told my brothers. We needed to return it." Behind them, a few bikers wheeled something forward, uncovered by a black tarp. Keanu tilted his head, puzzled. The leader smiled for the first time. We don't bring gifts often, Mr. Reeves, but when we do, we make sure it means something. The tarp was pulled away, and underneath stood a custom motorcycle shining like liquid chrome under the sun. On the tank, engraved in silver, were the words, "For the man who rides with heart." Gasps rippled through the crowd of onlookers. The motel clerk covered his mouth. Keanu stepped forward slowly, running his fingers across the engraving. His eyes softened. He didn't speak for a long moment, just smiled. Quietly then, almost whispering, he said, "You didn't have to do this." The leader replied, "Neither did you." There was silence again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was respect. 100 engines roared back to life in unison, echoing through the desert like applause. As the bikers formed a circle around him, Keanu climbed onto the new bike, the chrome glinting beneath the morning sun. He looked at them and said, "No matter how rough the road gets, kindness is still the strongest ride there is." The leader nodded. "Then ride with us, brother." And as Keanu joined their formation, the sound of engines filled the horizon again, a symphony of gratitude, roaring through the desert because sometimes, when you give without expecting anything back, the universe sends 100 hearts to thank you. The sun hung high now, casting golden light over the endless stretch of highway. The motel parking lot shimmered with the reflection of chrome and steel. One by one, the engines began to quiet, until all that was left was a silence thick enough to hold its own weight. Keanu Reeves stood beside the shining motorcycle, a masterpiece built from respect, loyalty, and gratitude. The morning breeze lifted the edge of his jacket, his hair moving gently as he looked around at the sea of faces before him. Rough, scarred, fierce, but filled with something unexpected: humility. The leader stepped forward again, taking off his sunglasses. His eyes, sharp yet kind, studied Keanu's face carefully. "Most people," he began, "see the jacket, the tattoos, and think they know us. They cross the street. They look away. But you—" He paused, pointing a finger gently toward him. "You didn't flinch. You didn't judge." The other bikers nodded quietly. Even in their silence, there was a rhythm, a collective respect. Keanu gave a soft smile. "I didn't see bikers. I just saw a man who needed help." The leader laughed faintly, shaking his head. "That's the rarest thing left in this world." The same biker from that night, the one Keanu had given his last $8, stepped closer. He held a small black box in his tattooed hands. His voice trembled slightly when he spoke. "When I broke down that night, I'd just come from burying a brother. I was angry at the world, angry at everyone. Thought nobody cared anymore. Then this man," he pointed to Keanu, "this stranger walks up and gives me his last $1. No questions, no cameras, no pity." He opened the box slowly, revealing a small silver keychain, engraved with the emblem of their brotherhood. "This," he continued, "belonged to the man we lost. We were going to bury it with him, but I think he'd rather it went to someone who reminded us what loyalty looks like." The crowd stood in reverent silence. Even the wind seemed to stop to listen. He stepped forward and placed the keychain gently into Keanu's palm. "You didn't just give me gas that night, man. You gave me faith back." Keanu looked down at the keychain, the metal glinting softly in the sunlight. His hand closed around it slowly. For a moment he didn't say a word. He simply nodded. A small, honest gesture that somehow meant more than any speech could. Then, from behind the group, another biker wheeled something forward, a polished wooden crate, stamped with the words "Ride Eternal." The leader gestured for Keanu to open it. Inside, wrapped in soft black cloth, lay a custom-made leather jacket, stitched by hand, the same emblem on the back, but with one difference. Across the shoulders in bold letters were 2 words, "Honor bound." The leader said quietly, "We don't give these to outsiders, but you're not an outsider anymore." A murmur swept through the crowd, the kind of low, powerful sound that carried meaning deeper than applause. Keanu took a deep breath, his eyes soft. "I don't deserve this," he said humbly. The leader smiled. "That's exactly why you do." As the sun climbed higher, the group formed a wide circle around Keanu. The engines started one by one, growling in perfect harmony. The air vibrated again, but this time it wasn't a storm. It was a celebration. The leader raised his hand. Brothers, today we ride not for war, not for vengeance, but for kindness, for respect. 100 voices roared in agreement, and then in one synchronized movement they kicked into gear. Keanu slid the new jacket over his shoulders, its weight symbolic, warm, alive. He looked at the keychain once more, hooked it onto the ignition of his new bike, and smiled. As he revved the engine, the roar joined the others, a thunder of unity echoing across the desert. They rode together, side by side, famous actor and feared outlaws, erasing every line that divided them. Dust rose behind them like a wave of freedom, sunlight catching every metallic gleam. People on the roadside stopped and stared, some recording, others just watching in disbelief. No one spoke, but everyone knew they were witnessing something rare, not a stunt, not a performance, but humanity in its purest form. As they reached a wide-open stretch of desert, Keanu slowed down. The leader rode beside him, shouting over the wind, "You see, brother, the world remembers fame, but real men remember kindness." Keanu nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Then let's make sure kindness never runs out of gas." The leader laughed, revving his engine. "Ride on, brother." And with that, the engines roared again, carrying their sound across miles of open land. A reminder that sometimes, a simple act of humanity can ignite an entire army of hearts. Because kindness, when shared, doesn't fade, it multiplies. The desert wind carried a strange kind of peace that morning, the kind that only follows storms of emotion. Keanu Reeves stood in the middle of that motel parking lot, the sound of 100 engines slowly fading into stillness around him. The air shimmered with heat, dust floating like golden particles of memory. He looked down at the custom motorcycle, its polished metal reflecting his image, its leather seat hand-stitched, its design raw yet beautiful. It wasn't just a bike. It was a story, carved, welded, and forged from gratitude. The leader of the group, still standing close, spoke softly. "We built this with our own hands. Every man here worked on it. We wanted you to know what that $8 meant to us." Keanu ran his hand along the handlebar, tracing the engraving. "For the man who rides with heart." His eyes lingered there for a long moment. Then he looked up at them, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't do anything special. I just helped someone who needed it." The silver-bearded leader smiled. "That's exactly what makes it special." The biker he had helped, and whose name was Ray, stepped forward again, his eyes glistening slightly. "You know, Mr. Reeves," he began, his voice low and rough, "we ride a lot. We see a lot. We've lost brothers on the road. We've seen people ignore pain, turn away from it." He swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. "But last night, you didn't see a biker. You didn't see a Hell's Angel. You saw a person. That changed something in me." Ray reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small photo, worn and folded. "This was my brother, Kyle, the one we buried before my bike broke down. He used to say, 'If one man shows kindness, it means hope still exists.'" He handed the photo to Keanu. "You proved him right." Keanu took the photo gently, looking at it for a long time. Then he said softly, "He sounds like a man worth remembering." Ray nodded. "He was. And now, so are you." The crowd of bikers stood still, men who rarely cried, now visibly moved. The silence was thick with meaning. Then one by one, they began to do something Keanu never expected. They removed their helmets, all 100 of them, one after another. The heavy leather gloves came off. The chains stopped clinking, and the rough hands of outlaws came together, in a slow, solemn applause. Not for a celebrity, not for an actor, but for a man who chose kindness when no one was watching. The sound echoed through the desert like rolling thunder, and Keanu, usually calm, composed, felt something inside him break. His eyes shimmered, his jaw tightened, but he didn't hide the tears that came. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "My mother once told me, the only wealth that grows is the one you give away." The leader heard him, smiled, and said, "Then you're the richest man we've ever met." They stayed there for hours, laughing, sharing stories, taking pictures not for fame, but for memory. Before leaving, the bikers left one more gift behind, a plaque carved from steel. Now mounted on the motel wall, it read, In this place, one man gave $8 and received 1,000 hearts. The motel owner, who had watched it all from behind his counter, quietly wiped a tear. "I've seen movie stars, but I've never seen something this real," he muttered. As the sun began to set, the bikers prepared to leave. The leader walked up to Keanu one last time. "Promise me something," he said. "Keep that bike. Don't hide it. Let people see what a small act can become." Keanu smiled. "I will. And if I ever see someone stranded, I'll make sure this story continues." The leader extended his hand. "Then this world still has a chance." They shook hands firmly, one symbolizing Hollywood, the other the road, two worlds that rarely touched, now bound by respect. When the bikers finally roared back onto the highway, Keanu stood alone in the dust cloud, watching them disappear into the orange glow of sunset. The sky turned crimson, and for a moment the world felt perfectly quiet again. He walked toward his new motorcycle, placed his hand on the tank and whispered, $8 well spent." He kicked the stand, revved the engine, and as the bike thundered to life, he looked at the road ahead, long, endless, and beautiful. Then he rode off, not as a movie star, not as a legend, but as a man who had just witnessed the power of one selfless act. The desert swallowed his figure slowly, leaving behind nothing but the fading echo of engines and a story that would travel far beyond that lonely gas station. Because kindness, no matter how small, doesn't just change one life. It rewrites destinies. The next morning, the sun rose over the desert like a soft flame, painting the sky with strokes of gold and amber. Keanu Reeves sat by the roadside diner, his new motorcycle parked a few feet away, gleaming under the morning light like a mirror of destiny. He sipped his black coffee in silence, the steam curling upward like whispers of the past night. Everything still felt unreal. The thunder of engines, the applause, the words of those men who had once been feared, but who had shown him more humanity than most of Hollywood ever had. As he stared at the empty road, a gentle smile curved on his lips. He wasn't thinking about fame, money, or the millions who adored him. He was thinking about something far more valuable, the invisible thread of kindness that had connected him to strangers, and how that single thread had pulled 100 hearts together. His mind drifted back to that moment, the flickering gas station sign, the tired face of Ray, the $8 that had changed everything. He realized that the true worth of a man isn't measured by how much he earns, but by how much light he leaves behind when he walks away. And in that quiet morning, Keanu felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. He finished his coffee, stood up, and looked toward the horizon. The highway stretched endlessly, winding into the mountains. The road was calling again. Before leaving, he turned to the diner owner, an elderly woman who had been watching him quietly from behind the counter. "Long ride ahead?" she asked. Keanu smiled softly. "The longest one yet," she nodded. "You ride safe, sweetheart. And remember, kindness has its own road. It always finds its way back." Her words stayed with him like an echo from fate. He put on his helmet, sat on the new bike, and pressed the ignition. The engine roared, deep, powerful, yet calm, like the heartbeat of every man who had helped build it. As he rode off, the wind wrapped around him like an old friend. The desert passed by in waves, the smell of sand, gasoline, and freedom blending together. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't running from memories. He was riding towards something every few miles. Flashes of last night returned, the faces of those bikers, their rough hands, their quiet smiles. They weren't just men on motorcycles. They were a symbol. Proof that even in the toughest souls, kindness can bloom like fire in the dark. He thought about Ray's words. You didn't see a biker. You saw a person, and it hit him. Maybe that's what the world needed most. Not more heroes. Not more power, but more people willing to see others as human beings again. Hours later, he stopped at a small hill overlooking the highway. The sun was setting now, the sky bathed in orange, pink, and crimson. He switched off the engine and sat there, letting the silence speak. He pulled out the small photo Ray had given him, of his late brother Kyle. The edges were worn, the image faint, but the emotion was strong. He stared at it for a while, then smiled and whispered, "You were right. Kyle, hope still exists." He folded the photo carefully, placed it inside the small compartment of the bike, and looked at the words engraved on the tank once again. For the man who rides with heart. His eyes glistened. He took a deep breath, feeling the wind rush through his fingers. Maybe, he whispered to himself, that's the only way worth riding. That night, far away from the noise of cities, Keanu found a small town. He parked outside a diner, and this one brighter, livelier, filled with laughter. Inside, a young waitress accidentally dropped her tray. Dishes shattered, people frowned, and she looked close to tears. Without saying a word, Keanu bent down, helped her pick up every single piece, smiled, and said, "Hey, don't worry. Happens to everyone." "You're doing great," she smiled back, shy but grateful, not knowing who he was, just feeling the warmth of a kind stranger. And in that moment, the circle of kindness continued. When he left the diner, he looked up at the stars scattered across the night sky. Silent, endless, beautiful, he started the bike, the headlight cutting a soft beam through the dark. The world felt vast again, but no longer empty. As he disappeared into the night, his voice, quiet, calm and thoughtful, echoed in the wind. People think it takes millions to change a life, but sometimes it only takes $8 and a heart willing to give. The screen fades to black. The sound of the motorcycle lingers, blending into a soft piano score. Then a line appears. "One act of kindness can outlive us all." Fade out. End of story.